英語を話します。So, once again, my name is Katie Conlon, and I have kind of a diverse, if not a little bit unconventional background. I'm 35 years old now, and I've spent basically the last 15 years of my life living and working overseas. I've spent 3.5 years doing humanitarian work in West Africa. I lived for a year here in Japan, but 8 years ago. I worked for a conservation organization in the Caribbean. I've lived on all continents except for Antarctica. And so I have, I would say, an extreme curiosity for the world that's rooted in kind of a profound love of nature and humanitarian issues. And I have a master's in international peace studies, and currently I'm in my 3rd year of a PhD. And I'm looking at plastic and waste stream issues. So how are we dealing with consumption on this planet? So all day long I think about sustainability. But at the same time, I think that sustainability requires alternative kind of frameworks and an alternative mindset. So I'm going to present to you today something that marries sustainability and leadership. It's called servant leadership. So I think it's really appropriate for kind of understanding a little bit of the heart set and the mindset for dealing with sustainability issues. Because servant leadership challenges kind of core, our traditional understandings of what leadership is. I mean, normally when you think of leadership, you think of somebody strong, you think of somebody dominant, but servant leadership is kind of the Aikido or the wabi-sabi form of leadership, where it's leadership from below, and where ideas are coming from different places than you normally think about. And also that flows happen in different ways than it's not linear, but it can also be circular. So, where did this concept of servant leadership come about? The servant leadership came about from a book in 1970 that was written by a man named Robert Greenleaf. And he read Herman Hesse's book called The Journey East, which was kind of an allegorical novel of a group of people that are journeying east in search of enlightenment. So it's kind of a parable to Siddhartha's journey east. And in the story, so it's these group of mystics and sages and people who are seeking. They're seeking an answer. And with them is this man named Leo. And he's actually their servant. And at one point in the story, Leo disappears. And then the whole group gets disbanded. So it was this one person that everybody thought was a servant, and he left, and then the mission stopped. And so many, many years later, the narrator of the story reflects back on what happened, and he actually realized that this man was not the servant after all, but he was, in fact, the leader. And when Robert Greenleaf read this book, he thought, oh, this is really, really interesting. And he came up with 8 kind of principles of what is a servant leader. So I'm going to go over the principles with you today, but they are transformation, personal growth, creating enabling environments, service, building trusting relationships, creating commitment, community building, and nurturing the spirit.
Can you slow down?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So as I go through these examples, I'm going to share ideas from my own research and from my own life experience, and I encourage you to kind of think about how maybe some of these have played out in your own businesses or your life or your experience, or potentially how you might be able to use these principles in the future to create a more balanced or nuanced form of leadership. So the first principle is transformation. And transformation is an essential component of sustainability. And I think in order to actually have a sustainability, we need some aspect of transformation. And I really like to think of the Bucky Fuller quote when he said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So I think a really good example of this is Bill Mollison, who started the permaculture movement. And Bill saw in Australia how agriculture was destroying the land. But instead of taking the streets and protesting and just saying, big agriculture is bad. He said, I'm going to build a completely new system. And so that's where the integrated framework for permaculture came about. Another great example of this is the life work of Paul Hawken. I don't know, is anyone familiar with Paul Hawken here in the audience? Kai? Google him later. He is working, basically his whole life mission has been looking at sustainability issues, and currently he's working on 100 transformation solutions. And he has a group of researchers, and they've basically come up with 100 points, and they're putting it together in a book, and they have an online platform. It's called Project Drawdown, and it's very much geared towards transformation thinking. So principle 2, personal growth. I think this one is very important. So I don't think we can have any sort of change in the outside world until we've slowed down and had the time to reflect within ourselves. And I don't think that the amount of technology, the amount of innovation, I think that all of that is actually irrelevant if we haven't had time to do the personal growth. I have a friend in Canada who is an environmental activist, and he's also a Buddhist, and he teaches meditation to activists because he realizes the importance of having a strong core foundation in order to do the difficult work in the world. Another really good example of personal growth is someone, his name is David Corton, and in his previous life he was a professor at the business school at Harvard. But he realized kind of the destructive practices, the destructive teaching that was going on for globalization and the trajectory of the world, so he completely changed his trajectory. And he's a co-founder of a very influential magazine called Yes Magazine. I really recommend people read that. It's all a solution-oriented magazine, and he also is an active lecturer and public speaker. So the next one is creating enabling environments. And enable environments help people reach their dreams and their full potential. Kind of thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once we have the basic levels taken care of, then we can do better things in our communities. And a great example of this, and Kai has had some first-hand experience of this, is in my hometown there is an organization called City Repair. And they are ecologically oriented placemaking projects to honor the interconnection of community in the natural world. That is their mission. And this organization, City Repair, reclaims the commons, and they take over intersections in areas of my city, and they paint the intersection, and they make community libraries and spaces for people to sit down. And so they take an area that was maybe not friendly to community, and they make it very community oriented. Another example of this, when I was working in Hawaii, there was an organization or a farm, but community place called One Island. And they had kind of made it their mission to create an enabling environment for the whole community. So any kind of sustainability issue, whether it be solar ovens or solar panels or solar fridges or composting or worms, this organization had made a space for community members to come and strategize and think about these issues. And I think this is so helpful for moving communities forward, is creating space where it is okay to talk about these issues. Because I know not always, if you're with your friends or family, and sometimes people don't really want to talk about new ideas, but having spaces where people are open to talk about these things is very important. And principle 4 of servant leadership is service. And I think service to the community creates a vision and direction of hope for the community. And I think we're all here today at the NELIS conference out of a commitment to lead and to serve our communities. Some people that I think have led exceptional lives of service, one of them is Wangari Maathai, and I have a renewed appreciation for Wangari Maathai. Not only did she lead through her service with the Planting Justice movement, but she also, did you know that she came to Japan? After she won the Nobel Peace Prize, she was invited to Japan, and she became very interested in the mottainai, the concept of mottainai. And she said that she had looked, when she had gone to other places in the world, for a concept like mottainai, but she hadn't found it in any other culture. And she was so struck by this that she used it in her own work and created a mottainai movement in Kenya to help people realize the concept of not wasting things and having reverence for things. And principle 5 is trusting relationships. And I think we're all here at the conference to make these kind of trusting relationships. And I think today, as we had our icebreaker, that was a good start to meeting new people. And whether you came here today with a burning question, or if you just are here to listen and kind of gain new ideas, I think that this is a really good catalyst and starting point for building trusting relationships. As everyone here in this room is very interested in sustainability, these are your future colleagues and peers and people to work with. So I think this is a great new trusting relationship for sustainability. And principle 6, creating commitment. I am part of an international institute that works on education for plastics in the ocean. It's called the Five Gyres Institute. And one of the endeavors that we do is a lot of youth education. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to not only think about engagement with adult audiences, but with youth, because those are the people who are going to be leading sustainability in the future. And I know from my personal upbringing, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, and it's an area in the US that is very environmentally conscious. So even as a child in my schooling, I had a lot of environmental education, we had a lot of outdoor school, our teachers were constantly teaching us about the environment. And so I think that has really made me who I am today versus if I had grown up in New York City or Los Angeles or some other place. And principle 7 is community building. And I think a most recent example of empathetic community building, I'm not sure how many of you have followed what has been going on in the US with the Dakota Access Pipeline. But it has been the largest gathering of tribes ever in the history of the United States. And it was through this shared feeling of empathy of different tribes where people have come together, not only in the US, but tribal peoples from other countries have realized this shared struggle over water rights. So people have come from as far away as indigenous peoples from Norway and from Ecuador coming to share in the struggle. And I think it's an important message that community is everywhere, and that sometimes you just have to call people and they will come. So community building. And the last principle of servant leadership is nurturing the spirit. And realizing that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and that by serving, our hearts and our spirits are full when we're working towards something with a greater community. And so I'm sure you have lots of great examples of people here in Japan who are working on sustainability in the servant leadership way. And I really want to encourage you that the takeaway from this is that around the world there are people working diligently to make sustainability a reality, and that you don't need to be somebody big or powerful to lead. That servant leadership shows us that starting from right where you are is a great place to start. And thank you very much.
So how are we doing? どう皆さん大丈夫ですか let's just take a breath, breathe, and 深呼吸を一回して and feel your body. Like how do you feel right now? Are you relaxed? Are you stressed? Are you confused? Are you really energized? So 今その自分が今何を感じているかとちょっとつながってみて、困惑しているのか、ワクワクしているのか、疲れているのか、なんかちょっと今のありのままの自分とちょっとつながってみてください。And so I'm going to talk about self-empathy. So we talk about empathy of other people, like your workers or your spouse, your friends. But I want to talk about empathizing with yourself as a fundamental element for transforming our world. And I have some mixed feelings because I actually want to do a 3-hour or 2-day workshop with you. Because it's not something we can talk about. It's something we do. It's how we are. So for me to tell you about empathy just feels a bit shallow. But I only have 15 minutes. So just briefly what I do, I am living in Chiba, but I do a lot of work in Tokyo, and so I teach permaculture. So how to do sustainable living. And I also teach urban permaculture. So how do we live as one with nature in, for instance, Tokyo.